Hello, and welcome to episode 218 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the... What date is it, Tom Francis?
7th of December?
Let's go with that. It's the 7th of December, 2017. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight I am joined by Tom Francis.
Hello, it is indeed the 7th.
Fantastic. And John Roberts.
Hello.
Hi.
I posit spiritually it's the 6th.
In what way?
I'm going to stop now before I...
You can't back that up.
No, it's just the 7th. I didn't know it, but now I feel it, and will passionately defend that fact. So, it seems like we've had a big old rush of indie news. Indie news.
Yeah.
Joining us from Indie. Indie news correspondent and time expert, Tom Francis.
Those are my specialties, alright. That game, this is going well. John, what's that game you've been looking forward to a long time with really good art?
Iconoclast.
Yes.
Hey!
By Joachim Sandberg.
Yeah.
I've been excited about this for a long time. Exactly how long, I can't remember, but I do remember looking at all of his pixel art to work out how you should do pixel art for Gunpoint.
Right.
So it's been about that long.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 6 years, right? Or at least 5.
It's fitting into that band of indie game, which is sort of like, the type you expect is never going to come out.
Yeah.
We had a few of these.
And the news is not that it's out, but just that there is now a release date. And it's January, is that right?
23rd, I think. Yeah.
2018.
2018. Yeah.
The trailer looks, it is beautifully made and seems the game is beautifully made. I wasn't 100% clear actually whether the animation bits we see in that trailer are cutscenes from the game or whether they're done for the trailer. Because he said something about having done some animation for the trailer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it all looks like bespoke trailer animation. All done in his style.
That's crazy.
So that's a crazy amount of work. Yeah. Which is kind of true of the projects as a whole, I think.
Yeah.
So it is an adventure platformer, but with tremendous pixel art production values. Would you say that's a fair way to sum it up?
I don't know if I want to invoke Metroidvania. I'm not sure how much you go back, but yeah, it's platforming and shooting, and you discover a bunch of gadgets and get powerful and go through a story and stuff with gorgeous pixels.
You have some kind of special spanner, it seems to me. I think that's like your main tool.
Is that what you were looking for, John, for Gunpoint? It was just so that you could have just huge spanners.
I am carrying a huge spanner in the Gunpoint developer commentary.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And the Heatsig huge wrench was there from the very beginning. So.
I think the wrench in Heatsig show weighs 20 kilograms in the game's physics.
That's a good Heatsig fact.
Yep.
So yeah, because I've not played. You guys played Iconoclasts in one of?
I think I did. Yeah.
One of his demos or betas or something that he put out 2 years ago, and I'm not normally one for those kind of games, but I genuinely enjoyed it. It had a great sense of exploration and discovery, and it wasn't nails hard, which is always something I appreciate in a platformer.
I was kind of worried about that actually, because the trailer brags about like 36 bosses or so. And
they're all easy.
I hate bosses, and bosses are usually hard.
Yeah, there's a tendency with sort of retro passion projects to also trend in to trend Megamanwoods. By which I mean be extremely difficult. But no. Well, I'm just glad that it's actually a thing. It takes it takes a particular kind of person to follow a 6-7 year project all the way through and just keep doing it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Goro Goro also has a release date.
Yeah, it does, which I think we spoke about on the pod, 4 years ago, deep. I remember, I couldn't tell you what number it was, but I know there's a Marsh's Graveyard era episode of the Crate and Crowbar where we talk about Gorogoa.
I think I played that as well. I think it was in the IGF that long ago. So that's another ridiculously, long running project, and it's being published by Annapurna now, who published Edith Finch.
Remind me what it is?
It's, if I recall, it's a game with lovely stylized art in panels, and I think you can move the panels around. Or there's
that one.
There's interesting relationships between the panels, like one is a different view of something else, of the same thing as the other one. But I can't remember any specifics about how it worked. But a lot of people, as soon as that release date was announced, a lot of indie friends were popping up to say they played like a recent version, and it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I've heard good things through the grapevine. So that's exciting. Davey Reedon is hiring for a new project, which sounds interesting.
Yeah. He describes it, the games he name checks are Stardew Valley and anyway, the details are, that it's about, he references Stardew Valley in the sense of ritualistic activities that you repeat every day in the game. And then on another layer, there is randomly chosen story events happening. And basically, this is a job listing, and he's asking for programmers. He wants a gameplay programmer, I think, and some kind of architecture programmer or something more technical. And for the gameplay programmer, he sort of describes what kind of gameplay that's going to be about. And so that's he's talking about some kind of system of story events that are chosen randomly and then figuring out a way to piece those together into an interesting narrative. And that's about all we know. But yeah, it's hard to picture what that means in any real way. Like, and it certainly sounds like whatever it is a pretty big departure from both the things he's done before, because Stanley Parable and The Beginner's Guide are kind of similar in format. They're very different games, have very different tone and everything, but they are first-person games where you walk around and you're talked at, and to varying degrees you can make choices, but neither one of them is anything like Stardew Valley. It's fair to say.
I think it's also fair to say, however, that this kind of like modular, sort of kind of randomized or dynamic game narrative creation is the holy grail that sort of pretty renowned linear game narrative designers disappeared in search of.
Yeah.
Like
Isn't this what happened to Ken Levine?
It is what happened to Ken Levine. It's like, well, we can make this kind of from point A to point B in a way that has an arc that people will resonate with. But what if a computer could do that instead? And then they vanish, and you, like in the Bermuda Triangle, and you never see them again.
Yeah, 5 years later, Davey Reedon receives a torn up map in the post.
Yeah, exactly. From Ken Levine. And it's just, a location in the South Pacific or something. And it's like, no one's seen Ken Levine in 40 years.
I think the weird thing about Ken Levine's
disappearance
approach was that he gave a GDC talk about it, like, must be at least 2 years ago at this point, like before it even really started in any major way. Just about like why this was going to be cool based on the ideas involved. And the ideas involved didn't sound like they wouldn't work, but they weren't new ideas. They were just like disposition ratings for each person, but they have two of them instead of one. And it was like, maybe you could do something with this that is more than the sum of its parts, but just telling us the parts doesn't get anything. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, it's like listing all of the bricks in a Lego thing, but not saying what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's, I'm not trying to be flippant to the point that I don't think it can work. And obviously like, it's like David Reedon has obviously done very clever kind of sort of experimental narrative design in the context. So maybe if anybody can make it work, he'd be one of those people. But there is a sense that like, there's this desire to break game narrative design away from, end to end planning towards this kind of like, well, if we can determine what the component parts are and then have a computer rearrange the component parts, but have it still, retain its soul, then we've solved some inherent problem with game design. I mean, functionally what you're talking about at that point is having kind of, responsive, DMing. Not that this is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, but like that notion of like, at the moment you can do this with another human being there to manage the process, right? Like if Ken Levine was available to personally tell you every bio story he could, then that would be it. Maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe that is where he's gone. He's working around every human being on planet Earth telling him a bespoke dynamic story. But you know what I mean, right? This seems to desire to see if you can capture the spirit of being told a story within a set of random systems.
I think the way this has been revealed for Davy's thing, i.e. just a job listing with no announcement. They hasn't even announced that, what the name of the project or anything about it, but he just, went through the details that you'd need to know if you're going to be a programmer applying for this position. Suggests to me that he's not sort of coming out and saying, I've solved narrative through algorithms. It sounded more like this is just one of the aspects of the game, is there will be some random events, and he wants someone who can, handle the technical side of that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it. That's very likely. That's very possible. What else in the world of, what else was the...
Getting Over It came out.
Yes, yeah.
Which is Bennett Foddy's new thing, which we talked about a bit on the crossover podcast. I have not played it and probably never will because, in Bennett's own words, he made this game for a particular kind of person to hurt them. And, I am not that kind of person, but would still be hurt by it.
You're sort of near that kind of person, close enough to the collateral damage.
Yeah, the kind of person it's made for is the kind of person who can't resist this kind of brutal challenge and will still feel intense frustration when they lose all their progress. And I'm the kind of person who also doesn't enjoy that kind of challenge.
It's the Dark Souls of QWOP.
Yeah. It's actually, I don't think we mentioned this before, but it's based on an older game called Sexy Hiking, which is a game maker thing. I don't know much about the history of it, whether it was like a free thing. It probably was, because I think it was old enough that you couldn't really charge for indie games back then. But yeah, I looked at a video of that today, and it's remarkably similar. It is the same mechanic. It's, in that, there's no story about why you can't use your legs. You're just a person who, with a disembodied hands holding a hammer, like also a climbing pick, I guess. And there's just a gap between your hands and your body, Rayman style. There just are no arms. Whereas in Bennett Foddy's thing, you're in a cauldron and you're holding a long sledgehammer type pick. But functionally, you're maneuvering this thing around yourself in order to hook onto the environment and drag yourself up, which is exactly how Sexy Hiking works. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, that's kind of what he does, right? It's like physicsy walking. Like, what if walking was the hardest thing in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's... Was there anything else? I'm sure there was something else.
There's the Portal Bridge Builder.
Oh yeah, there's a Portal game, but it's Bridge Builder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what the fuck's going on there.
It's, I think made by the same team who's made Bridge Builder before.
That makes sense.
And they've got Portal wrapping on it. I don't know how much involvement Valve actually had. Yeah,
this felt like a weird thing where it wasn't clear. Almost every headline I saw was, there's a new Portal game, and it's this. Whereas it seemed more like there's a new Bridge Constructor game, and it's Portal themed. But I don't know anything about who made it.
I mean, they've got the fantastic art style from the Portal tutorial videos and level editor and the VR experiment thing that I can't remember.
What was, like...
The lab.
Yeah, the flat stick men running around in trucks and things. It looks great, and I'll probably buy it on that alone, because I am shallow after all.
There was a Peggle game with Portal themed levels, and TF2 themed levels, I think. I can't remember anything else about it, though.
Yeah, but I mean, this was sort of advertised as like new Portal game. I think it'd be more fair to say that it is Portal themed Bridge Builder, which is not a bad thing, but
It's funny, Valve surprisingly sort of free and easy with their IP. Like, they don't give it to anybody, but they do give it out in some surprising instances, like this, and they're often doing like crossover items, and I can't remember any other instances, so I'll end the sentence there.
There's been plenty of TF2 crossovers in other things, often kind of surprising things.
Yeah.
Like card games.
Yeah, Poker Night at the Inventory would be the weirdest example of this.
Strange.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's not so much that they don't give it out to people who make bad things, and they don't give it out to like people with no reputation necessarily, but it's just surprising choices of who to like. A poker game is not an obvious crossover with TF2, and Bridge Constructor is not an obvious crossover with Portal.
Yeah, you get the impression that a lot of these things emerge from like I suspect, conversations in pubs. That's the feeling
Yeah.
I get, right? Like, I'm pretty sure the Poker Night of the Inventory people are based in Seattle.
Is it Telltale?
Oh, maybe it was Telltale, wasn't it? Jesus, yeah.
Weirdly. That's another
yes.
strange thing about that.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, no, I know why I thought it was that. Yeah, they collaborated with a lot of different people on that, though. They had, like, Strong Bad and stuff in that as well.
Yeah, I know they worked with the folks who made Defense Grid, Hidden Path. Did they start CS:GO or something?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and they're Seattle based, so I'm sure that was a sort of a happy crossover meeting. And yeah, just knowing how Valve works, the fact that everyone has a lot of freedom and is very self-directed. Things happen because someone at Valve decides they should happen.
Yeah, that's I guess what I mean, right? Like someone goes like, it would be cool if we had the Heavy from TF2 in our poker game. Someone's like, that sounds fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, there's Humanity. There's a trailer for that today, which looks kind of cool.
Yeah, it's visually amazing. I assume it's a puzzle game. It looks like
apparently it's a crowd action game.
So it's like abstract geometric levels of like big pathways and stairways and stuff, and then they're just filled, just absolutely packed with little people.
Yeah,
like
crowds
the crowd
of
scenes
humans.
in like Hitman, Blood Money, and where it's just literally standing room only, and they seem to be moving like lemmings, like they just move in a direction until told to do something else, and if there's a drop there, they just fall off to their deaths. And but because of just the sheer numbers, there's something really distressing about watching it. It's like really dark.
And they will fight initially fisticuffs and later with guns. Crowds, equally dense crowds of business people.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on there exactly, but
and there's obviously some kind of like redirecting the flow of the crowd and making them not fall off stuff or get squashed by bricks kind of thing. Deeply odd. But kind of really striking trailer that we will link in the show notes.
I don't know anything about who is doing it. The site is very mysterious and has like categories for movie and game and something else.
Humanity, the movie.
Yeah.
Cool. So there's one other bit of news that I wanted to get up at the top of the show. This is actually more like housekeeping, but for once I wanted us to do a tiny bit of housekeeping before I'm drunk. Which is that announced today, formally came out yesterday, sort of. Patreon, who obviously we rely on to a great extent, are making some changes to the way Patreon works, and these changes are not great.
Can you explain this to me in easy to understand words? Because
yes,
I just received an email from Patreon, kind of trumpeting it as if it was the best thing ever for everyone involved.
I don't think it's been messaged particularly well. It's a change to the way Patreon works that would make more money I think it would make more money or more consistent money for, people who use Patreon, as creators. I wanted to get around the buzzwordy word there, but that's probably the simplest way of putting it. And it will certainly make more money for Patreon. It's not good for people who back things on Patreon, which is one of the things. So what it is instead of, I think, a variable fee on that you pay when you withdraw money from Patreon, creators will always now get 95% of any given donation. However, every single donation now carries a service charge of 2.9% plus 35 cents. So what this actively does is discourage lots of small donations to creators that update frequently. Unfortunately, that accurately describes us.
And it's the patron who pays the extra charge, right? So you back for $1 and you end up paying $1.
Yes. So the person, the person who is making the donation or paying, they are the people who this charge gets passed off onto, which means that, and I imagine a lot of people are caught in this. If you back the Crate and Crowbar for $1, in each case now that's going to be about like $1.37 per episode, which over the course of a month adds up to an extra $1.50-ish. So like, your $4 a month Patreon pledge becomes essentially like a $5.40. I'm not going to do the maths, but you get what I'm saying. And that money is just going to Patreon. So that's obviously a bit crap. Well, it's a lot crap. And particularly for us, like if we were doing, one thing every 2 months that people individually pledged, if we did one every 2 months and people pledged, $8, you'd feel the sting a lot less, but that's just simply not how we work, because Patreon works off the basis of individual pieces that you do. And the logical thing for us is to say that the weekly podcast is the thing we do and everything else springs off that. And that's been our structure so far. So I think, Tom, you wisely said that there's been such a negative reaction to this from basically everybody, as far as I can tell, that, wouldn't be surprised to see this change or not happen at all. It's not due to kick in until December the 18th. So what we are going to do is, particularly because it's such a busy time of year with Christmas and stuff coming up, we can't really make any huge changes to how we do things. And in any case, we're going to be putting out fewer things that we charge, or we charge backers for in December anyway. So, we're not going to make any changes immediately, but I wanted to sort of get out in front of it and tell our Patreon backers that if this concerns you and if this extra 35 cents per donation is likely to be a problem, please just stop backing us. Like, that's fine. Completely understand. It's not a choice we made to change it, but also I wouldn't want people to get charged more than they expect. So that's completely fine. And if it does stick like this and it does cause a problem, then we will just look into alternative ways of funding the podcast in the new year. And that's not, an announcement one way or another, but it's just to reassure people that it's being considered, and we'll try and figure out the best way of adapting to make sure people don't end up spending money that they don't intend to, basically.
I think it's been interesting because the people I've seen bitching about it, on Twitter are creators. They're not the people backing. It's the people who actually aren't, as creators, you're not losing any money, but it feels like your patrons are being screwed for supporting you, and that Patreon are the ones who benefit from it.
Yes, yeah, and that's essentially it. Like, I just really don't like the idea that, because we see this with Patreon. It's an interesting system, and I like it in principle. It's interesting watching how Patreon donations fluctuate, and one of the reasons they fluctuate is that, like, it's because it's almost like a subscription service. There's definitely a degree to which, immediately after, Patreon pays out every month, you lose, subscribers. And that's very likely because people forget they're backing it and they go, oh, I'm still backing that and I haven't listened to Crate and Crowbar in a month. So I'm going to cancel that for now, which is fine. And I completely get it. Like, that makes complete sense. But people not only having that feeling of like, oh, it's got, that money's gone out, but also having, and I've just been stung for like an extra $1.50 that I wasn't expecting. Like, yeah. I feel like, hopefully people feel the value of backing stuff in any case, but you kind of want to make sure that they're feeling the maximum value of it, and having a decision made against your will that just charges people who support you more ain't great, basically. So that's the thing. But yeah, just wanted to brief PSA, bear in mind that's a thing. We will do whatever is, right for the pod, basically. It's a bit of a bummer. I should have done that at the end of the podcast when I was drunk. It's funny. Let's talk about what we've been playing. John. Sorry, I put you at the worst possible moment there.
Hi.
Quiet cough. What have you been playing?
I've been playing a game. Terribly titled 7 The Days Long Gone.
Is that how many days are long gone?
No, there's about 2,000 years long gone.
Okay.
So it's a bit off.
How many is 7?
I don't know why it's called that. It's a really interesting game that you get from seeing the very first time you see a trailer of it, because it mashes up so much stuff. At its kind of core, it's a cross between a classic isometric RPG and a third-person action-adventure stealth game. So you're looking down on it as if you were playing Pillars or Divinity or something, but you've got direct control of your little guy who's sneaking around all over the place, jumping over small walls, mantling up big ones, that kind of thing. And it's really fun to just break the kind of rules that you've been kind of indentured to over hundreds of years. Several.
Hundreds and thousands of years.
7 days. Yeah, I'm only a few hours in, but it is fun. It is kind of a little bit all over the place because it's smashing so many things together. Like the general interaction you have with everything, like I said, is great. It's really nice to come into like someone's mansion where you're supposed to rob something, and to just kind of turn around and jump on some boxes and then get up into the ventilation ducts and then run along the roof and stuff like that. Whereas before, you're just like, you're trying to look at this thing like, right, I'm going to have to talk to that guy and pass a talking check and then like roll my stealth check and get across this bit. It's like, no, I'm just going to duck and dive and roll and tumble across this area. It's really nice flipping of expectations and stuff.
Is it sci-fi?
It's everything.
Okay.
And this is my main problem with it at the moment. It's fantasy and sci-fi combined. And for no particular reason, just because they thought it was cool. I think it's technically post-apocalypse, if you can make it through the terrible lore intro. So there's some sort of magical apocalypse between a highly advanced technological race and demons, maybe? And then everything went wrong and everything was a wasteland for a while, and then some champion who might be evil reunited all the tribes and blah, 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 blah. And now we have huge cyberpunk cities, which are like little chunks of Coruscant or something, which is great for a really agile stealth game, like that multi-tiered level design so you can jump up and down and avoid guards and so on. But then when you go through like a really techie prison area and there's just a big wooden rack on the wall with like steel halberds and stuff. It's like this doesn't mean anything. You're just slamming things together, and then like you pass into another area and you go from like big techie fences and there's just like a picturesque like wattle and daub house. And it's like This is not the poor option. This would be incredibly difficult to build. It would require a lot of resources.
Kevin MacLeod over from Grand Design to the expense of your cyberpunk wattle and daub house.
It's just, that doesn't really work great. It's like like I said, I'm only a few hours in. Maybe they'll start drawing these threads together better at some point, but at the moment it's kind of a scattershot approach. Someone just loaded up a blunderbuss with fantasy bollocks and shot it at
in
Star
the
Wars.
aftermath of the asset wars. That'd be a good idea. It's a game set inside the Unity asset store where the people of the fantasy section do war with the prefabs of something else.
I just read a big chunk of this Quake making of thing that Shack News have been running.
Is it called the Quaking of?
That would be great. I don't think it is called that. I think it's called Rocket Jump.
Well, they fucked that, didn't they?
And it's enormous, and there's 2 chapters that you can read free. But yeah, the development of that game, it was supposed to be a D&D fantasy game originally, and then just kind of morphed over development through basically lack of direction.
Back into Doom, basically.
Yeah, that was like a big point of contention amongst the team. Is it started out with like, they're going to do something new. They're going to do fantasy because they keep jumping genres and stuff or settings. And they worked. That's why like the levels are all kind of castles, and all the textures. Most of the textures are made as like stone and rivers and grass and stuff. But then they couldn't really settle on like gameplay. At one point, it's going to have like side-scrolling beat-em-up type sections. Like it would be first person. Then when you meet an enemy, you're going to side-on view, and you do like fighting game moves. And when they thought that was too ambitious, and they eventually just like started adding guns because they will love guns. And then they just ended up with like, well, I guess we've got some sci-fi guns in a fantasy setting, and this guy just made a bunch of like space station type levels, so we'll put those in as well. And yeah, just completely coalesced randomly. So maybe that happened here.
It's kind of weird though, because Quake has a very specific aesthetic to me that completely works as a kind of discrete thing because it's so weird.
I think it's a strange artifact of just them being so far ahead of everyone else in technology that they could do whatever they want and it would still be great. Like they could have just artistically done any old mishmash of anything, and because it was so graphically impressive, and also they had good gameplay sensibility, they knew how to make something fun, we would have lapped it up anyway. And so that lets them do it's ended up feeling really unique. That is like the quirky thing about Quake is that it's both those settings mashed together, and in a way that I think did work. I don't think, even looking back on it now, I don't think, oh, that's a horrible, ugly mess. It does feel like there's something like maybe because of the limited texture palette, but even the sci-fi things feel kind of earthy and like grimy, and they fit with the castle things, even though, there's a technology clash.
Yeah, like it's not an ugly game as such. It just offends my aesthetic sensibility. They've also got this kind of comic book outline shader that runs over everything. They maybe did this to try and make sure everything kind of pops and has clarity, because you can zoom out quite far and still play it with direct control. But it kind of makes everything look edgy and sooty and dark and gribbly, and it's kind of backfired. I've seen a few areas where they forgot to apply this thing to their models and textures and so on, and in my opinion it looks much better like that. So.
Maybe there's a law reason for this. It's one of the consequences of the asset wars. Some people walk around without incorrect, because they can't afford the shaders. I'm building a Cyberpunk Unity Store dystopia here, and
stealth-wise, it breaks one of your cardinal rules, where enemies can find bodies.
Oh no!
And you can't move them.
No! How dare they?
I think the majority of the time they do something that I've only seen in No One Lives Forever, weirdly, where a guard will come up and be panicked and will kind of look around, and then will say essentially, this is too much paperwork to deal with, and just like dissolve the body with something. It's just a weird touch.
Is it okay then? Like, are they not alerted?
It's kind of fine.
Because they've done a crime then.
If a guard, this together.
If a guard catches them doing that, then that guard shoots that guard, and then they have to dissolve that body, then another guard finds it. You end up with a culpability spiral.
The game's really, really bad at explaining anything beyond basic movement. 3 hours in, I've only just discovered through randomly clicking on all the menus that you have a teleport ability. Nowhere near as powerful or kind of essential to the stealth game as Blink is in Dishonored or anything like that. But suddenly there's opportunities opening up. I'm excited to find other hidden menus, which might make the game a whole lot better.
So what is it that's good about it? You said you were having fun with it.
I think it's mostly, it's relatively freeform. There's big open levels in multiple tiers. I think I've one of the first hub locations, so I'm picking up quests and so on, and that means like hopping over a fence somewhere and doing a little bit of sneaking, and then grabbing whatever you want, coming back and upgrading your gear, and it's kind of got that Diablo loop, but with sneaking instead. Yeah, I'd like to. Definitely going to give it a chance to go back and play a lot more. See if it goes anywhere. See if it falls into the Technomancer trap.
What's that? That sounds
Apparently,
amazing.
games designers have problems with the Technomancer concept.
Right.
Like the sci-fi wizard thing.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
I'm mostly basing this on the last game with the Technomancer in it, called the Technomancer, which was pants.
Are you just one person in this?
Yes.
And do you get to choose your character in any way?
Nope. I don't know if your character is so integral to the masterful story they're telling that they couldn't possibly let you have some customization, or just that it was hard, or that voice acting is expensive and they had to call you Teriel? Teriel.
Teriel.
Teriel. But you have to say it in kind of faux Cockney by someone who's never been to London.
Teriel.
Teriel. Like, everyone talks like that so far. You talk to your mate in the Thieves Guild and it's like, Teriel, let's go break in, yeah? Like, where are you from?
He's from that Watland Orb cottage over there.
In Cyber Fulham.
Yeah, it's a really interesting experiment, and I'm glad they were brave enough to slam so many things together and see what works. I'd like to go and see if any of it works.
That's 7 days long gone.
Days long gone?
Is that
Is it 7 the days gone long gone?
Yes.
7? Okay.
That's better, because then it doesn't read as 7 days long gone.
Right, yeah. But it sort of sounds a little bit like Hark the Herald Angels Sing kind of. What manner of, this is the least important question, but I've started asking it, so I'll finish. What manner of punctuation are we talking? Are we talking a colon? Is it like 7 : the days long gone?
No, it's blank. It's left entirely up to you.
7 the days long gone?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It's mostly like font changes.
That is actually that's a brave. Oh, so hang on. So it's made clear by is it even capitalized 7 or is it a numeral 7? Or is it just 7 written out?
No, it's full caps except for the V, which is slightly larger than the rest of it.
Okay. How does this affect Steam? I'm fascinated by this because this seems ungoogleable.
I'm not sure. I looked at the picture, not the word. Okay. Sorry.
That's such a you thing to say.
I understand that 7 was taken. They couldn't just call it 7. But could they have just called it The Days Long Gone? There can't be that many. Would that have clashed with a Haim album?
I don't know.
Actually, I think that might have done. Days Ago. Yeah.
They're not good at words in general. Like, yeah, you played Teriel, and my principal adventures so far have been in a place called Peh. That's the noise you make when you can't give a shit.
That is giving up on the name.
What's Peh like?
It's a prison colony on an island somewhere, which is made up of shanty towns in impeccably built brickwork houses surrounded by technomancer installations.
Okay. So you're only sent to Peh if you've done a crime?
Yes.
Okay.
And you have done a crime.
Oh.
Unavoidably so.
Right. That's great, actually. I laughed at first, but that's... you got it
now
right.
It's good.
Yeah, now it's good. I've actually been playing a game with some phenomenal writing. And by that, I don't mean that at all.
Wow.
Actually, maybe I do. So I've played through the Destiny 2 expansion, Curse of Osiris. And I'm not sort of mega interested in banging on about Destiny 2 again, given that Tom S and I spoke about it last week, with this expansion on the horizon. Needless to say, it's made the internet men furious. And probably good, I don't know. It's alright. So as Destiny expansions go, it's kind of interesting. I think it's interesting specifically because this is the first Destiny expansion that PC players will be getting. And the things that are good about it, I think, so Destiny is an excellent shooter and it has phenomenal art and great music. And this expansion has all of those things. It has fantastic looking environments and great music, and the shooting is amazing as ever. I mean, it's more of the same amazing shooting. Like, they haven't done anything spectacularly original with it, and it's more Destiny. But, it ticks those boxes, and I think that elevates it to a certain degree, because it really does look incredible. And, even when it's dragging you back through environments you've already been to in Destiny 2, there's an element of like, fuck me, this looks amazing. So that's all good. It's not the kind of shot in the arm that people feel like the game needed because of the various progression systems. And I think it does highlight some problems with those kinds of things. So it is a new kind of mini campaign and a new pretty small open world area, which is on Mercury, which is really cool. And there's, a new adventure to go on and some new environments to see and some new incredible lines of writing, which I would like to get to. But beyond that, there's also sort of like an expansion to the end game and the kind of typical kind of like with every Destiny expansion, this is the rhythm. They move the level cap up a little bit and a new tier of gear and you chase after the new thing. If in World of Warcraft days, you paid your monthly subscription and every couple of months a new raid came out or a new level dungeon or a new raid gear tier or something and you chased that. In Destiny, you don't pay a subscription, but every 6 months, actually it's usually about every 6 months, a pack comes out, which costs about 15, 20 quid, and you get that instead. And that extends the level cap. So it's functionally, it's World of Warcraft, right? Like it's the same model, just expressed in a different way. One thing that's a little bit strange about it, which has definitely, it's got people writing op-eds. I don't think it's quite op-ed worthy as a phenomena. But Destiny 2 has a largely benign loot box system, like loads of cosmetic items crammed in a chest. And you get one of them every time you level up past the level cap. So, you're getting them pretty quickly. That's fine. The issue is that they have crammed like most of the rewards in the game into that loot chest system now. So by doing the quests and the end game content and the strikes and the raids and that kind of thing, you don't really get anything except some stuff and more XP. The kind of rare stuff is actually hidden in the loot chests from a cosmetic point of view. Obviously, power enhancing things are all through regular play, but games have traditionally used endgame activities as a kind of like, or have used cosmetics as a way to reward you for like, you've done this rare thing, you get to look like this. 90% of that stuff is in the loot chests, which means that its distribution is functionally random, and that just kind of doesn't work. You know, it's obviously some part of the great last 2.5 years of loot box theory craft, the how do we make infinite money from this system kind of gold rush that has clearly happened in every major studio. This is one of Activision's attempts at it. And it seems to be collapsing everywhere at the same time for different reasons. Either it's actively hurting the game one way. I don't think it actively hurts Destiny 2 beyond simply making the game feel less, well, not actively hurts in a kind of, you know, you can't compete or you can't feel like you're being successful kind of way. But it does certainly hurt the sense of how special it feels to have certain things. Because it's not really connected to what you've achieved. It's just connected to every couple of hours of play, you level up and you get one pull on the random distribution lever, and sometimes it spits out a cool spaceship and like, I've got this now, but it doesn't feel anything like having the cool raid ships in Destiny 1 did.
Yeah, I thought that was weird when TF2 did their items when they launched it first, because people have these wildly different playstyles and they'll invest differently in different characters. But when you find a hat, you can just find the rarest spy hat ever immediately as a first-time player who's never played spy before, just by killing some people as a heavy. And then you get to wear that and everyone's like, oh, wow. Like, if that did mean something, it would be a really cool thing to be wearing the rare spy hat and show how good you are at spy. But instead it was just like, well, that's a person who received an item at one point. And
I think traditionally games have managed a balance of this. Like, there's been some rare things that you get in that way, and there's been some rare things that you get through play, and it's up to you to kind of express yourself in whatever way. And this feels like the needle has just swung down that gradient a little bit too far. And that is genuinely a bit of a shame. Similarly, you know, there's plenty of things that don't, like, this expansion will have been well in the works by the time the game was released. So this is not the one where they're capable of responding to a lot of the criticism. And this was, I mean, it's funny watching history repeat itself, but this is exactly the arc of the first game. This is a lot better than the equivalent expansion for Destiny 1 was. But it's also not, like, given the, you know, the conversation had already started about, like, how are they going to save Destiny 2? It's not the kind of step forward that it requires. That's all kind of fine. And I think, you know, I sort of I don't really have a problem with the fact that this is the sort of thing that you just get if you're into the game and you play it frequently. I know it's an expense, but I do think that relative to like map packs for Call of Duty or kind of similar seasonal, expansions for shooters, it's a lot better value really in terms of what you get for the money than that kind of thing. Also, I've always thought of it as essentially the subscription fee for what is an MMO. So, sans that in another context, I never really minded buying the season pass and just getting these things as they roll out. That's that's not a kind of, I think it is possible to be more kind of astute and critical than that about these things. But if you play the game and you like the game and you play the game frequently, then I don't think it's just the new season you're entering into and you pay a certain amount for the entry fee. It does make the base game less valuable because inevitably there's now a kind of level of the game beyond where you can get to that is just cut off to you. Anyway, one thing I thought was interesting about it, apart as the story of Destiny 2 kind of unfolds, and not just the story of the characters in the game, but the game itself. Destiny 2 is the story of them taking everything that people said was wrong with Destiny 1 and unpacking it and making it more accessible and somehow finding out that was a bad thing. So they balanced the loot system and suddenly nothing means anything anymore because it's not fucking broken as fuck. And in this case, the one thing they've done with Destiny 2 is be a lot more adventurous with the storytelling and imply a lot less and try and show a lot more about the kind of this sci-fi universe that they've created, which I like very much, despite how dumb it can be sometimes. Like and this is really interesting because this expansion is all about a character called Osiris who is implied a lot in the first game and existed as this kind of like idea. And you get to meet him. He's in the opening cutscene of this. He plays a fairly substantial role in it. And Destiny 1 did all of its storytelling with kind of level design implication and bits of text in an app that was individually good, like 100-word snippets of sci-fi writing and left the rest of your imagination. And as a result, it was amazing. And Destiny 2 has has set itself the challenge of like, that's not good enough. You know, we know the tiny percentage of people who actually dig into this kind of thing. We're gonna make that story, the stuff people actually really took from Destiny 1, we're gonna make that the main event, which on paper is a really, really good idea. However, it doesn't really work because you end up this focuses on Osiris and an enemy that he's associated with who are the Vex, who are these kind of time-traveling robots that may or may not be simulating the reality that you occupy. And that's been one of Destiny 1's kind of core things. And it opens with a really fan-servicey reference to Destiny 1. This is one thing that's interesting about it being the first expansion for the first game to come out on PC. is I think a lot of its best ideas from a storytelling point of view will mean absolutely nothing to you if you didn't play Destiny 1. And whole chunks of its resolution don't make any sense if you didn't play Destiny 1, which I think is a little bit shit for PC players who really, it doesn't catch you up on that stuff. Characters refer to things that happened in Destiny 1, or things that were implied in Destiny 1, but they'll never catch you up on it. It is a trip to the wiki for you. But for that reason, I don't feel too bad sort of explaining kind of what happened. So it opens with,
well, sorry, very briefly, they had that problem with Halo. It's certainly not the same 343, certainly isn't Bungie or whatever, but Halo certainly between a bunch of the main games lost me completely. And then you go back and realize, oh, you should have read the intervening 2 novels to work out what the hell happened here. But, sorry.
No. It's a good point. And it's an interesting one because, I think I mentioned it before in the pod, the Vault of Glass was Destiny 1's first raid. Really phenomenal statement for that game. I feel like everyone who loved Destiny 1 despite its problems loved it because they played it enough to play the first raid, which was just you'd never seen anything like this before. And it was this sort of descent into this, kind of cave follow time where you're kind of traveling, the whole notion was that they even had an explanation for why you can attempt the same raid over and over again because, it was a sort of sci-fi about timelines and kind of different causal realities and all of this kind of thing happening at the same time. And the intro cutscene to Curse of Osiris is, on paper, it's just 6 guardians, like the main characters of the game, running into a huge firefight with the Vex, and then time stops, and Osiris steps through a portal and starts rearranging the firefight so the guardians win, and then something happens and that spurs the adventure. If you played Destiny 1, you know that the room he's in is the Vault of Glass, and it's one particular encounter in the Vault of Glass that you're now seeing in a kind of cinematic way, and the whole implication is that's your raid team from the first game, and that he was there the whole time, kind of manipulating probability, which is super cool, right? But if you didn't play Destiny 1, it's completely meaningless. It's just a man does a space thing. And its problems kind of spiral out in a really interesting way because it really wants to make those big ideas about time travel and things like that, the core of the experience you're having. But it's still Destiny. It's still a shooter about shooting robots and standing on plates. And that's the 2 things you do. Sometimes you shoot a box. And then sometimes you go on a jump pad. And then you shoot the robots again. And there's a great moment later on where someone tells you, in this part of this part of the Vex consciousness, they have responsive algorithms that will construct the perfect security response to anything you do. So if you're going to survive, you have to be unpredictable. And then you just jump on jump pads and stand on plates and shoot robots and shoot boxes for 5 minutes. And they're like, wow, you've destroyed time. And this all coalesces for me in one of what I think might be the perfect bit of Destiny writing. So the previous perfect bit of Destiny writing was that wizard came from the moon, which was, it's a perfectly true statement in the context where it appears. This one has also said by the ghost, who, is your kind of floaty companion, who I think might just be an idiot. They might just be seeding the fact that the ghost is an idiot. That would actually explain a lot of Destiny's writing. But the line is, and I fucking love this, you enter this vast sort of Dyson sphere multiple reality simulator complex, and Ghost says, it's called the Infinite Forest. And he says, the Infinite Forest? It's huge. And it gets better the more you think about it. It's it's huge, but also impossibly small. But also, it's it can't be infinite and just very big. It turns out it's quite big, and there are floating islands in it. But, yes. Also, it does, towards the end, a man does bellow, give me back my ghost, which I did enjoy, but nothing will top the Infinite Forest. It's huge for me. In terms of writing that is so bad, it's good, but bad, fundamentally. Yeah. It's all right. In conclusion, it's fine.
Tell me what Mercury looks like.
So, this is, again, a great example. So Mercury, is obviously very hot. It's time travel, robot, so geometry, space, Egypt.
Right.
There are reasons for why it looks the way it looks, because the idea is these robots have turned it into a giant machine for simulating different realities.
Right.
So there's lots of kind of robot geometry, and triangles, and big glimmery portals, like 80s kind of laser grid things. You also see a terraformed Mercury at a point in the past, which looks amazing. Like, all just sort of like, Destiny has like the strongest line in, sci-fi 70s paperback cover, just art, like, and skyboxes, and phenomenal skyboxes. It really is great for that stuff. Like, and the artistry that goes into that isn't to be underestimated. Like, they do, when they fuck up, like, in things that actually, like, that really do matter. Like, you know, lines of dialogue or progression systems and things like that. But I still don't think, like, given the choice between playing a sort of a shooter that doesn't look like that and playing Destiny, I find that choice really easy to make, because it just, you look at it and it's just like, it's so much like, they're so much more playful with their palette and their kind of sense of space. Like, you know, Bungie kind of emerged into public consciousness for just for that one screenshot everyone took where you can see the ring of Halo kind of stretching out onto the horizon, and the fact that they can make you feel like you're in a much bigger, more grand place than you're actually in, and that it's much more imaginative as well. And it's still fucking great at that. Like,
I like that with Halo, their big thing was like, it's this giant ring, and the Destiny, the big thing is this giant sphere.
Yeah, exactly.
We've really just got the one shape, but we'll just look at it from different angles.
Well, honest to God, like, I wrote something for PC Gamer recently about the lore of Destiny 2, which has been a bit harder. Like, it was one of the things that we were planning to write, but like, you know, literally Destiny is the story of big shapes in space. Like, it's triangles versus circles.
Have you seen the Hudsucker proxy?
Yes.
The bit where, is it Tim Robbins just draws a circle on a piece of paper and points to it and says, you know, for kids. That's the Bungie creative office.
Exactly.
You know, for gamers.
Yeah, exactly. It's Spaceball. And like, you know, and in this you get a rare glimpse of Spaceball in a different context, which is like, ooh, lore. It's good. Like, yes, it's just, I mean, I really do defend games when they're simply like good experiences. I think I've defended Battlefront 2 on that basis on the last podcast. So maybe this is just the month where Chris rolls up to defend AAA, shooters because what they look nice, and I'm a simple man. But like, I'm always impressed by the artistry that goes into these things. And like, it's just got, have you played Destiny, John?
No.
You really should, I think. Just cause I know you like good industrial sci-fi design.
Oh, yes.
And it's just fucking full of it. Like, you'll keep guns, even though they're bad, just because the artistry that has gone into designing the physical thing that you're holding is just like, amazing, given that they also have to stretch that stuff over a loot system that has so many different designs in it. There's so much variety, like, and they create meaningful kind of just textural kind of differences between guns from different manufacturers and little details, like the gun where the manufacturer who makes guns where the ammo is liquid and there is literally a little bubble you can see filling up and draining as you fire it, and the color of the liquid in it is based on the damage type of the gun, and that's calculated dynamically, and it's like, if you change the damage type you can see it change. Like, it's just full of that stuff.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Good soundtrack as well, although Curse of Osiris does really lean on its one kind of like Curse of Osiris theme motif that plays at the start of every mission to let you know it's happening, to the point where you go like, oh, I get it. This is the theme for this expansion. So maybe there's that. But yeah. Anyway, I've rambled enough about it, because everybody who knows if they're going to buy this has already bought it. Rendering this pointless.
How's the, I think you've talked about how Destiny 2 is less sticky. How's the value proposition?
I still think it's very good. And I've said this on the pod before, that I think if a game can hold your attention happily for 50 hours, it's fine. That's fine. And like, I don't know how sticky it'll be after a certain point. I'm likely going to play all of the single player stuff. I'm going to see everything and then probably stop playing it again. And I can't, because my life has changed in a bunch of ways that mean I can't just play Destiny for an hour every day. Like, I don't know. I suspect it's not sticky yet. It does sound like it has some problems. It sounds like they've added a gun to the Crucible, the PvP mode, that is just broken it again. This happens every now and then in Destiny.
It's what the people want, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. They're complaining about it, but I can't tell. Like, the complaints seem to be divided between Destiny 1 style complaints and Destiny 2 style complaints. As Bungie enter the you desperately cannot win now spiral of a difficult second album. Which is weird because their first album was difficult. So, yeah. Basically, I really don't envy their position at the moment, because it's just like, Yeah, I suspect the entire loot box thing was misjudged, not from you're rinsing players and ripping them off kind of way, but because it encourages you to put rewards in a place where it's actually deeply unsatisfying to get them. Which is just basically, we now enter part 5 of reasons loot boxes are bad. A multifaceted collapse of one idea. Anyhow, Tom F.
Yeah.
What have you been playing?
I'm playing 2 things. One is Sorcery. It's got an X down, so I have to say it like that. Which is the choose your own adventure game. Based, I guess, on a Steve Jackson thing. Is it fighting fantasy? Does anyone know?
Yeah.
Because fighting fantasy is like a franchise, right? That is.
Yeah.
Is there a book called Sorcery?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be a fairly faithful translation. Right.
Because I was pretty familiar with like the original run of fighting fantasy books and read those as a kid. And this is a game adaptation of that by Inkle, who did 80 Days.
Well, that's a good match.
So yeah, they're very good at exactly this kind of thing.
Isn't this really old?
Yeah, it's pretty old. I think there's at least 6 of them. And I'm playing the first one for the first time. It was something that like, I think not too long ago, within the last year, maybe I saw John Walker reviewing the latest one of these on RPS, and, he loved it and he's loved all of them. And, so I made a mental note to check it out. And, I'm actually playing on my phone, but it is on, Steam as well. And I kind of wish I'd played on Steam instead because it's slightly too small to read comfortably on a phone, even on my annoyingly big phone. So yeah, it's a choose your own adventure just with, you know, all that, fiddly stuff handled for you. Like keeping track of your stamina and how many provisions you have and that kind of stuff. I was interested to see how they did combat because, that was, you know, rolling dice in the Fighting Fantasy books. In this, you, decide how hard you want to hit the enemy. And if you choose 0, then you are defending. And however hard you hit them, it's a sort of a bar that you just choose how much of that bar you want to use. That consumes a certain amount of your energy. I don't think it's stamina. I think stamina is something different. Stamina is your hit points. But there's some other like attack energy or something. And so if you use a full bar, you haven't actually used all of your energy for the whole fight or anything, but you've used a lot of it. And next time you won't be able to do a full strength attack. If you defend, I think no matter what you do, maybe you gain a little bit of energy back. But if you defend, you don't expend any energy at all. So that's the most energy you can get back is if you just defend. And you are told in text what it looks like your opponent is going to do. And sometimes I think I'm right in saying, well, sometimes they give me text cues that does not really tell me conclusively what they're going to do. And so I don't know if it's always possible to deduce from the text what the opponent's next move will be. But basically, if they are going to defend, you want to either defend yourself or do like a very light attack. Actually, a very light attack is the best in that situation because you'll always do, like 1 point of damage or something, some minimum amount. And if they're defending, doesn't matter how strong your attack is, you'll only do that minimum damage. So a big attack is a waste of your energy. If they are going to do like a 50% strength attack, you want to do a 51% strength attack. But obviously you don't get that kind of precise information. You see, oh, they're tensing up for a big strike, and you don't know, like, some of them have different maximum strength. So, you know, if their maximum strength is less than you, if you do a maximum strength strike, you'll always beat them. But it will use up a lot of energy. And I quite like that system. It's interesting. I haven't played with it enough to know how much information you really get, and that'll obviously determine a lot of it. If you're literally told every time exactly, you know, if it's possible to conclude from the text exactly what they'll do, it would be a bit mechanical. So I think I've definitely had ones where like, oh, you see they're sidling to the left. And it's like, well, this is not a combat system that lets me defend from a certain angle. Does that mean they're going to attack from the left? Or I think I would not be surprised if there are some that are just inconclusive. It's just like, they say that and you don't know what it means. Anyway, my adventure so far is, I like the vibe of it. The text is kind of short and to the point, and I've kind of missed this like really traditional fantasy adventure thing that I used to get out of the Final Fantasy books, like Fighting Fantasy books, sorry, not Final Fantasy. And yeah, you're an adventurer in a village. You're venturing out to get the legendary crown or whatever. And everyone's like, kind of nervous for you and, helping you, giving you provisions and, training you up and make sure you know how to cast spells and stuff. And then you go out of the gate and you decide which route you want to take. And my adventure so far is like, I walked ahead a little bit and immediately found some stinking corpses that gave me a permanent debuff to my maximum stamina because the stench was so bad. And so then I went, off into the wilderness or the countryside to kind of, cause the path to my destination looked too long, and that was a choice I made. And, headed north, and then just on the map, like the interface for it is you're looking at a map most of the time, and then when you arrive at a encounter, it goes to text, and then you choose what to do in the text, and then maybe that takes you to combat or not. And yeah, when I chose countryside, my character just went really far north, and I thought I was trying to get east. And then I had the option to like go along the riverbank instead, so I went along the riverbank. And from that point, it was like either go back to this village that I hadn't ever been to, or check out these people I'd seen on the river. And I didn't really want to check out the people on the river, but the only other option was to go back to this village that just seemed to be totally the wrong direction. So I checked out the people on the river, and they seemed to be fishing, and I investigated more closely and then just fell down a slope. And I chose to try and stop myself with my sword, because I looked into like, oh, you can cast a spell if you want, but I looked up what the spells were, and they all cost 3 stamina, and I thought I'm not going to lose a lot more than 3 stamina from this fall anyway, so it'd be pointless to spend it to try and save myself. So I stuck my sword in, and it turns out I was falling down rock, so I just blunted my sword and then fell full force. Then an elf knocked me out. And then I woke up imprisoned by the elves.
So much for the tolerant elf.
Yes. I woke up imprisoned by the elves, and they stole all of my money and all of my rations, which happens to be the only 2 things I had. And now I'm just heading off back to the village that I was refusing to go back to in the first place. So that's the totality of my adventure in Sorcery. It hasn't gone great, but I am technically still alive.
Don't leave home is the answer.
Yeah. I like it too, because everyone makes a big deal of you leaving. They're all kind of rooting for you. And I even, just before this encounter, I said, there's a long wall running along this area, and you can either proceed or you can look along the wall. I looked along the wall, and it led back to the settlement I left, and you can see a figure up on the top of the battlements, like watching you, and you know it's like one of your friends from back in the city. And they're the special people who can like see, they have telescopic vision, they can see as far as they want. And so that was immediately before I fell down a slope, got knocked out by the elves. Oh God.
It's like, we're all rooting for you, and then everyone watches you just fall down.
Just imagine him like slowly rubbing his forehead. Oh, come on.
Head in his hands.
I also played a little bit of Shadowhand just before I came out, which is the new thing from the creators of Regency Solitaire. Which was the solitaire game set in high society in Bath.
Yes.
Where we are.
But in the past, it's not like in Waitrose.
Yeah. I just assumed it was implicit in high society that that meant the past.
Yeah.
Clearly that's an anachronism. In this one, you are a highway woman. Your origin story for becoming a highway woman is hilariously flimsy. It's like, this lady you're traveling with gets possibly kidnapped, and so you just become a highway woman on the spot. I'll take this guy's clothes and this pistol, and off I go. And then your actual encounters with bandits and stuff, you seem to be encountering bandits rather than...
You're a highway woman, but you rob bandits?
Yeah, I guess maybe you're a highway woman in kind of aesthetic and not so much in purpose. You are trying to find your friend.
Like Batman.
Yeah, just like Batman. It's basically a Batman game, but they couldn't get the license. So instead, you dress as a highway woman and play card games against the bandits you encounter. And the card game is... There's an elaborate stack of cards, with the top one on each pile being face up. And there is a card at the bottom of the screen. And so far, suits have not mattered at all. And all that matters is like, if there's a 3 at the bottom of the screen... you could turn over any 2 or any 4 on the deck. So, you can't turn over another 3, and you can't turn over any other number. So it's like, it has to be exactly one more or exactly one less in number, and suit doesn't matter. And so in most situations, there is, a lot of the time there's zero choice. There's nothing you can turn over that, there are just no available cards that are that, so you just have to pass your turn. If there is one to turn over, then obviously you just have to turn over that. There's no point not doing that. You just do it. And if there are some face down cards below it, then it will reveal those, and then you can play those, and they might be, the one you turn over becomes the new card at the bottom of the screen. So if you turn over a 3, then if there happened to be a 4 beneath it, great, you can play that 4, because now 3 is the one at the bottom of the screen. And so on. So if you happen to see like a whole arrangement of like, oh, there's a 3 here, a 4 there, a 5 there, and then another 5 there, but then a 4 here, and then you can plan ahead your route. But most of the time there is not that. There is just like only one choice, or then maybe there's 2 choices, but neither of them are going to turn over any cards at all. So no new things will happen at all. And so basically it's incredibly luck dependent. I think, as far as I can tell, it is just a random shuffle of the deck. It's not, if the game is doing any fudging of these numbers, I haven't detected it. And if it is doing any fudging, it's failing to fudge it in a desirable way, because I just outright failed like 2 of the introductory fights. You know, in the first like 5 you do, it feels like a kind of a tutorial chapter. And I did the only thing I could do at every juncture, and I just lost the fight. I don't know what you want from me then. Like, that was it. It has loads of mechanics that have not come into fruition yet. Like, I've got a pistol, and in the normal game mode, you are facing off against somebody, and so you do as many of these as you can, turning over cards, and doing that charges up your pistol. And if it happens to reach full charge, then you can fire your pistol and you do 3 damage against the enemy. But if you run out of cards to play, you have to end your turn, and then they can do however many they can do, given a different card at the bottom of the screen. So sometimes they just get a really good card that happens to relate to loads of the ones on screen, or there's a really good chain they can do from there. And there's just nothing you do about that either. And so it's clear that, like, later on you find new weapons, and weapons have different properties, and like enemies have armor ratings, and you can penetrate armor and stuff. So eventually it's clear to me that there'll at least be choices of which weapon do I fire to do the most damage against this opponent. I don't know. I've got one ability where I've only just got this, where once it's charged, it's a horse, and it runs around and randomly removes 2 cards. So that's nice.
Hang on. So you charge the horse.
Yep.
And the horse removes. So the card doesn't. So hang on.
The horse just runs away, then lightning strikes 2 cards. I don't know how it's causing that. Questions?
So I kind of understand the card game being a kind of abstract kind of competition mechanic that powers your weapons, but the weapons are the thing actually happening in the duel. Basically, I'm trying to understand the mechanics of fighting in this universe.
Is it kind of
are the cards real? That's kind of what I'm getting at. And if the cards are real, how does they get hit by lightning because a horse ran away? But also, basically, question mark above my head.
I think it's purely abstract in terms of how the cards relate to the combat. I don't think the cards do physically exist. I don't think you challenge the bandit to a game of cards. I think you are trying to shoot them, and then the way the game is
right
representing combat is.
So in some ways, the fleeing of the horse represents a kind of loss of opportunity or a distraction.
I think it's your horse, and once it's done that, it will continue to charge again. So charge up, not rampage. And so I think you're sending it out to trample on the enemy. Except what it really does is help you, because it just, if you're stuck and there are no cards you can play, or no cards you can turn over, then you send your horse out and it destroys 2 random cards, and maybe those will turn over a card that you can play.
Basically what you're saying is, horse, create opportunities for me, and the horse just does something.
Yep. The analogy is not super strong, but my bigger problem is just that...
I really want to dig into this, Tom, as long as you've got... Okay.
I don't have any choices yet. I don't have anything I can do. I just always do the only thing I can do. Sometimes, like very rarely, 1 turn in 6 maybe, I have 2 different cards I could play, and one or more of them would reveal a currently unrevealed card. Sometimes you can see what the card is below that one, and so you know revealing it will not help you at all. There's a 7 below that, and that after you play this, you can't play a 7. And sometimes there are 2, and they both have a card beneath them that will be revealed, and so you can do either, but there aren't any decisions to make there because both have an equal chance of giving you a card you can use. You have no idea what it's going to reveal. So it's really rare for there to be any meaningful choice. Like if there's one where you can see that the card below it won't help you, and the other one where you can't see what the card below it is, of course you do the one where you can't see what it is. If there's one where you can see the card below it will help you, and one where you can't see what it is, then you do the one that definitely will help you. There are so few times when it's like a strategically interesting decision of like, which one of these do I want? Maybe if you can see what they both are, and both of them are usable, then there's a further assessment to make of like, after I play that next card, what would it connect to? That has happened never so far.
Does your opponent draw their cards from the same deck that you do?
I don't know in terms of the decks, but basically the card at the bottom of the screen, when you are stuck and you can't play a move, because that card isn't 1 greater or higher than anything on the board, you end your turn and that card goes away and they get a new one. So, that's been cause of several annoying things where I get a card, just turns over a random card for me, doesn't relate to anything on the board, so I have to end my turn, turns over a random card for them, connects to 15 cards, and they charge both their pistols and shoot me. And it's just like, okay, that's what happened then, and I lost this fight, but I don't see what else I could have done.
That's why you need the opportunity horse.
Yeah, well, when that's charged, yes, I can now I have one decision to make. Do I use that or do I not use that? And, if I can't do anything else, I might as well use it. And so it's just incredibly binary. And then it takes ages to charge up again. So it's like a once per fight thing.
Right.
And I do now have a pistol and a gun, but the decision of which of those to use is also really kind of trivial because one is, takes 3 cards to charge up and one takes 4 cards to charge up. But the one that is quicker to charge up does 1 less damage. So if I can charge the 4-1, I should use that. If I can't, I guess I'll use the 3-1.
Right.
So it's clear all this stuff will get more complicated later, and I'm sure there's interesting decisions to make down the line. But like, I keep wondering if I'm missing something about how the basic mechanics, because it just seems like I don't have any choice of what to do.
I don't want to paraphrase it too much. I know Pip's played it and has extremely similar feelings, I think.
Right.
I believe she's finished it. And I know she's finished it. So, I mean, this is probably something she should say, but like, I think she had the experience of knowing that in some cases the right thing to do is not to go on a run because it can create a run for your opponent. So you have the kind of unsatisfying solitaire thing of like not doing, you know what I mean? Like doing sort of a minimal kind of efficiency plays in order to create bad experiences for your opponent, which maybe does have some strategic depth, but plays against what's gratifying about solitaire, which is clearing space, getting on these big combos. It's interesting. Yeah. It sounds to me, and I haven't played it, but it does sound to me that like, that solitaire is a great fit for this because it is so substantially random, right? Like, it's fine, as a kind of, it's a pattern resolution exercise that you do by yourself. Hence the name.
Yeah.
Shall we do some questions from questions?
Yes.
A phrase that I've reconciled myself to, given that someone, Kane probably, almost certainly Kane, on Discord, pointed out I might have invented. I blamed Marsh for it last week, and I have, unfortunately, to take that back. I blame Marsh for most other things. Let it be noted.
I kind of jumped in quickly to try and stop the rambling introduction, but
no, there's no stopping it. This freight train only has one direction, and it's convoluted.
Well, I noticed my role has always been to flag up the weirdness of saying from questions, such as like, well, that's where they come from, or I suppose that's the best place for them.
This podcast is now much like British democracy, just a series of mad traditions. We don't understand where they came from, but we can't stop doing them without triggering some kind of crisis. That's the hottest take you're getting out of me this week. First question comes from Brendan, who writes, "Would you play this?" And just sends us a picture of Deus Ex and the City. Which is, as you might expect, I'll put the link in the show notes, but in case you don't want to look at it, it's just Adam Jensen with the cast of Sex and the City.
Quite a good merge of the different cover art? Like it?
Yeah, I mean, it's effectively done to the extent that you can do that. Tommy, the biggest Deus Ex fan I know.
Yep.
You're sort of television.
The least big Sex and the City fan, perhaps.
The tiniest.
Yeah, I'm just extremely small. I love it, but I'm very small.
Exactly. He's 1 centimeter tall. He's like a borrower. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I gotta say, I have trouble visualizing it. I suppose it would be Adam Jensen. Actually, it would be Adam Jensen in like conversational combat with Kim Cattrall, or about like they're unwilling to give up the details of their current love life situation, and you have to use your like pheromone org to assess their vulnerabilities and go in for the...
I think it would just be reading a lot of sexy emails. I think fundamentally you just eat catering-sized tubs of energy bars and read a lot of steamy office emails. I'm into that. I'd play it.
I think I'm realizing now that Kim Cattrall is the only actress whose name I can think of from Sex and the City because she's also in Star Trek.
Yep. That's the territory we've wandered into. If only Pep was here. John, would you play Deus Ex in the City?
If it was like a series of assassination missions where you had to stop people spending gross amounts of money on materialistic possessions. If it was basically anti-capitalism, the game.
Right.
I'd be
you play as a kind of... how does that reconcile with the fact that you are a $1 billion man?
There's some interesting philosophical opportunities, certainly. There's some room for back and forth in your conversational combat.
You should just enter a big room at the end where you pick between shoes. You just the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, Kim Cattrall pops up and says, "We're the same, you and I."
Maybe each member of the Sex and the City cast could represent one of the different endings. That would work. Would it? I don't know.
You could play the hacking minigame to, crash the servers of major retail outlets to make these things free.
We are betraying our lack of real Sex and the City jokes so much as our wealth of Deus Ex jokes. But nonetheless, it does sound a bit like sex, and therefore the joke does work. I would like to just confirm that.
It'd be interesting to hear a Sex and the City podcast try and come up with theories for how this could work as well, and see if their increased knowledge of one category and decreased knowledge of the other one would create similar problems.
Yeah, I don't want to assume that we know more about Sex and the City than a Sex and the City expert would know about Deus Ex. I'm not willing to brave that territory. If anything, yes, perhaps less. But nonetheless, I'd love to play a Deus Ex comedy. That's because I want to play another No One Lives Forever game, basically, which is really functionally, if you want to find the tonal midpoint between these two things within the realm of the games that actually do exist, Nolf is pretty much as close as you're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's the one that has various forms of,
Does it have a comedy monkey?
It does have a City? There's probably a comedy monkey in the Sex and the City. I think wasn't it Sex and the City 2, the film that went some pretty insensitive places?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if there's ever going to be room for cruelty to animals on set, maybe that's it. Nolf, at the very least, did not harm a monkey. I don't know what I'm talking about. Except I would defend the series on the basis that, as far as I'm aware, the Naughty's immersive sim comedy series, No One Lives Forever, did not harm a monkey. And I'm willing to stake my reputation as a journalist on that. Are we done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next is actually a wonderful email. Not a question so much as just a wonderful email from David, who writes... Hey gang, a little Poirot-related anecdote I thought I'd share. Probably too rambly to read on air. Up to you. Well, it was up to us, David. And we decided to read it. Way back in episode 195, just before the great Poirot-Columbo conversation derailment, Chris uttered the following. I'm not doing this in the Poirot voice. I don't know if I've got the souche. I don't have the souche. That's me doing my own voice there. At the time, I had no idea there was an actor named David Suchet. So upon hearing this, my brain passed it as one might when hearing a French word one doesn't know, but kind of gets the gist of. In this case, my half-occupied brain decided that souche was probably a certain synonym for swagger, moxie, or savoir-faire. He had a certain souche about him as he entered the room, if you will. I'm happy to report that I've successfully deployed this non-word in several conversations and would invite and encourage you to do so. For example, I caught up with a pal who was out of sorts. Afterwards, I sent him a text saying, hope you feel better and get your souche back soon. Without missing a beat, he said, I'm not sure I ever had much of a souche to begin with, but I'll still endeavour to get one. Brilliant. Since then, my girlfriend and I have been powering through Pyro and loving it. So thanks for doing a pod about an amazing 30-year-old TV show that my grandmother used to watch. It's honestly delightful. It's also the perfect way to give 2017, a horrible year in many ways, the middle finger just for a few hours a week. Cheers, David, who's Indecision on Discord. P.S. I'm typing this while in the middle of a 4-week road trip up the east coast of Australia. My girlfriend and I bought a used car just for the trip, and when deciding what to name our trusty steed, we both agreed very quickly that it should definitely be Hastings. Looking forward to the next Little Grey Cells so we can listen on the road. David. 100% on board for Suchet becoming a word. Because it's a little bit like sachet, which is kind of like probably where you're getting that from.
I thought of cachet as well, like if you have the cachet to
yes,
do something.
It's somewhere between cachet and sachet is Suchet. You get a U from somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
The U is within you.
Yeah, exactly. The Suchet was inside you all along. Yes, no, it's brilliant. I wanted to say quickly, apologies for the sort of momentary absence of Little Grey Cells. We've just been super busy with other things, and so people may not realize this, but holy shit, is Christmas just the most time-sparse time of year for game journalists. I imagine a lot of industries kind of collide with a brick wall at Christmas where you work twice as much for 2 weeks so that you can have a week off. But yeah, it's been one of those things where even when we have had time, it's like trying to record a thing at the end of a day where you've already done a double shift. So we would like to get one done before Christmas. But yeah, it might be that it's a little while before we get back to our reliable weekly schedule. A little bit like Bloodborne.
Have there been Pyro Christmas specials?
There have been, but I feel like we're committed to this in the order that they occurred kind of thing. And it's probably more us to end up looking at the Christmas specials in like May, you know? But yes, I'm glad people are enjoying Pyro. I'm just, again, glad that we've proven that, the notion of a coherent content, hashtag brand is a complete lie. And that we can be your one-stop, for now, Patreon destination for video games and ITV shows. Next on the list is, I almost said next in the running order, and that's because I've done a lot of pen and paper role-playing recently, is Alfie, whose initiative role permits him to ask, Dear Crate and Crowbar, Chris has mentioned a few times that he hasn't played XCOM 2 War of the Chosen much or at all. He claims it's because he's been busy and hasn't had the time. However, I found secret evidence that it's because he's avoiding a conflict of interest. See attached screenshot. He attaches a screenshot. Oh, well, you guys have seen it. And I'll put the link in the show notes. I didn't realize that they had taken my face for a poster in XCOM 2 War of the Chosen.
It's presumably, some kind of Advent, like, Overlord or something, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's one of the user-made posters.
It looks like me with a fringe and a more manicured beard than I tend to have. And it's a little bit like that Morrissey autobiography that came out that might as well just have had a picture of me on it. It's definitely an issue with if you rob me of the sense of scale that allows you to kind of frame me as a 5'5" man, then I do become momentarily indistinguishable from a variety of generic white men, including Morrissey and this Advent guy.
This feels like it's sort of like a slider on your stat profile of like how many people look like you, because I think Graham is quite high on that. We often see people who look like Graham.
Yeah, well, Graham was famously the lead in Prey.
Yeah. And then our friend Matt Castle is incredibly high on that scale. He is just forever being told, I saw someone who looked just like you. And there's like, someone else here in Bath who's, just reliably, every time anyone sees him, they think they saw Matt Castle. Yeah. It's one of those faces.
Yeah, I think it might be one of those faces, but nonetheless, eerie. We'll put the link in the show notes.
I don't think I do. I've only seen, there is one stock photo of someone who is not me, but looked enough like me that for a second I thought it was me.
I think maybe I just specifically look a bit like Morrissey in a way that I can never really shake. So that's just a thing. That's always a cross I have to bear, unfortunately. I didn't ask for this. See attached screenshot. Clearly sold his image rights for a substantial sum and has been hoping none of us would notice or ask about his new money hat. One thing I love about Alfie's email is that he's capitalized he's put an exclam at the end of every single sentence, which makes it feel like a kind of grand jury testimony. Either that or he now represents the height of post-invasion alien overlord ruled fashion. I enjoyed the veiled compliment in that, which is that, like, I have finally achieved a kind of stylistic prominence, but it's only in the context of the domination of Earth by a fundamentally inhuman species that understands nothing about human values. As a visual gag, I know this won't work as an email.
Well, tough.
Thanks for the great pods and have yourself a merry little Christmas. Cheers, Alfie. Yes, no, I don't think I've ever seen a Tom Francis doppelganger or a John Roberts doppelganger, for that matter.
I get quite a few people telling me they, like, sending me a link to like, oh, I thought this was you, and then it's just nothing.
Oh, it's just like a crab or like a,
often
an IKEA cabinet or something. When you say nothing like, you just mean it's just a human person.
Yeah. Just maybe like the skull shape is the same, but like all of the flesh on the skull is different, which is an important part of a human face.
That's all we're talking about, really. It's just, sometimes that flesh on the skull looks the same. Out of our depth at this one as well, apparently. Next in the order is Sean, who writes, "Hello. My significant other had an idea for a game in which you play as a dog searching crime scenes, but the crime scenes have been eaten by a mysterious animal that has pooped it out. Your job is to therefore rummage around in the droppings and recover what evidence you can. For whatever reason, I had a strange deja vu-esque feeling. I'd heard this idea before or something like it discussed on the pod. Am I an insane person, or did such a game or anything vaguely related to this premise ever get discussed? I'm losing confidence as I write, but I was so sure for a brief second that I had to ask." That's from Sean. And I really like, I like any email that signs off with like, "I'm losing confidence as I write this," because it makes me think of the end of like a lot of Lovecraft stories or even kind of similar horror where it's like, even now as I consider this, I wonder differently, and like, no, Dagon! And then they get,
Using my detective instincts,
Is this like a vision mode?
Yeah. I don't remember this, but I could well believe that we have discussed, the concept of when you kill like an animal in an RPG and you find incongruous items on its body, such as a fork or a coin. The concept of like, isn't it funny to think about like how that got on that creature, was the basis of an all over I did at PC Gamer once, where it was just called CSI Azeroth. And it was about like, after you kill a boar, if it's got a silver fork on it, you've got to figure out where that silver fork came from and reverse engineer the circumstances of its death. And so if we talk about that might be a triggering thing. You don't go through their feces, but you go through their still warm body. So it's equally disgusting.
I like the idea of the detective that has to murder everyone they think might be a suspect so they can go through their things.
Yeah, this was, I was like, I liked the idea that it was just a boar dying was something that a detective had to investigate. Like, how did this happen? Who could have killed this boar? Why do they have this? Yeah. This person's business card on them.
Yeah.
So they ate that person.
Yeah. Detective mystery built entirely around the death of an animal is a stupid idea that you definitely shouldn't invest any time into. John?
Stay far away from this one.
Okay. Next is Brian, who writes oats. No, hang on, that's not what he writes.
Oats. That's what your pet goat wrote to us.
Brian's a horse. No, Brian isn't a horse. Brian writes, I can read. He didn't write that.
He's really proud of that.
I said that, Chris. Me. Hello.
He could also write, presumably.
This is why we didn't do the Patreon thing earlier. This is why we did do it earlier. This is going real well.
Brian, the start of the podcast was also full of us just saying, oh God, this is going to be wrong.
I can't believe we've made it this far. Dear Oats and Grain Bars, he writes, you gentlemen seem like the sorts who'd have your ear to the ground about such things, so I was wondering, what are your thoughts on the future of Games Workshop video games? We've had plenty of competent games like Sanctus Reach, Deathwing, and the upcoming Gladius 4X game, and the Inquisitor Diablo clone look solid. But even at their best, the scope of their development hasn't matched that of the setting. Apparently the new edition of 40k is doing well and GW's shares are up. Do you think this new push from GW with the lore and miniatures could lead to more ambitious use of the IP with some higher budget productions? Bonus question. In the same vein as the Star Wars related question from a few weeks ago, what's a game you'd copy into the Warhammer/40k universe? Personally, I think Mass Effect 2 would work a lot better in the fantastic sci-fi setting of 40k with Space Marines, where you can't swing a cat without hitting something analogous to a giant Reaper baby or a possessed insect man. You all seem nice and I enjoy the fruits of your labour. Brian, who manages to sign off there with a lukewarm take. I think about this a bunch because I'm actually often struck by the kind of mid-tier-ishness of Warhammer games. Like, there are good ones. I think So some disclaimers. So obviously I do genuinely really like Total Warhammer 2. It's got some issues with the Mortal Empire stuff they've added on, and ever with Total War, it's not perfect. But I really, really genuinely did enjoy it. One of my highlights of this year. So it's hard to say that all Warhammer games have kind of not quite hit the mark. The disclaimer there is that I did some work on a related product for Creative Assembly. So that's, don't think it colored my impression of the game too much, but yeah, there you go, full disclosure. Also, I should probably disclose that the Gladius 4X game that's coming out is written by, friend Dan Griliopoulos, who we all know, and who I am distantly related to. So it's just disclosures all the way down for me. So yeah, but nonetheless, it does stand out to me. Things like, Space Marine, which I replayed a chunk of recently to write about, is quite good, but a bit crap. And it's really fun, but it's a bit crap, right? And most of the good Warhammer games are fun despite having some kind of fundamental integral crapness to them. And there's lots of like, not just bad ones, but like super niche things. Like I love the Horus Heresy setting, which is part of 40k. But it's really only ever been rolled out for things like, Talisman, spin-off games, Talisman being a board card game kind of thing. It feels like it's so much more vibrant than that you kind of want. You want more from it than this. And obviously it's a license that can't be too difficult to get because everybody seems to have it. And I find this endlessly fascinating because I really can't think of very many, pre-video game as we know them IPs or franchises or anything else that video games owe more to than Games Workshop stuff, really. Like only Aliens, and Warhammer owes a lot to Aliens. So, in terms of, and that's not to encompass the entire breadth of video games, because they're not more diverse than that. But if you think about, Games Workshop and Citadel were the lens that Tolkien passed through on its way to, all video games. And similarly, the lens that things like 2000 AD passed through on their way to all video games. Games owe so much to the Warhammer notion of a Space Marine and the Warhammer notion of an Orc and the Warhammer notion of, all this stuff. So it's kind of remarkable to me that they're not at the front of games. And there's definitely a parallel universe because Blizzard created Warcraft as a bid to get the Warhammer license. They were like, we can make this. And when they didn't get the Warhammer license, they just made it themselves and now it's gigantic. And there's definitely a parallel universe where Warhammer and Warhammer 40k are Blizzard's video games, and World of Warhammer is the biggest MMO, or the archetypal MMO, and Warhammer 40,000, the real-time strategy game, is the definitive RTS esport. Because Blizzard can't avoid that, right? They had Space Marines and Eldar and Tyranids in a game and pretended that they'd invented those things. It would remain remarkable to me. And as for the future of it, I think, I'd love to see, given that they tend to be sort of mid-tier games, I'd love to see them break away from, we will make X game in this genre, right? We'll apply this as a skin to something.
That's kind of why I had trouble answering the question, which is sort of what game would you make with the Warhammer license? And in order to be able to tell you that, I need to point to an existing game and say, just like that, but with Warhammer. And I don't really want that.
Yeah, because I do think it can work. So I think I've said in the podcast before, the ways in which I think Total War benefited from Warhammer, not just the other way around. I think Warhammer gave Total War designers freedom to do things they couldn't do in an interesting way. So I do think there are sort of genre and game series matchups that work. I do think a Mass Effect style RPG where you play as, like an Inquisitor or an agent of the Inquisition, something like that would work potentially really well. Although you're kind of I can definitely see that going the way of Technomancer. Because you're entering what John described earlier, it's like the Technomancer danger zone.
Well, that was going to be my answer. I'd love to play 7 if it was set in the Warhammer, in a 40k universe. Because those guys fucking nailed future technology wizards. You can't really get much better.
Warhammer, you mean?
Warhammer, yeah.
Well, it feels like it's suspended between two poles where you have the kind of the full body horror end with Warhammer and you have the full this is probably fine end with Star Wars. I would say XCOM for this. Like, I think there are so many different, in fact, because there are games in these settings, but, Warhammer has a lot of really great, in all of its iterations, loads of really great, sort of, formats for interesting small team combat. You could do XCOM with, sort of Space Hulk.
Yeah.
Really cool. You could do XCOM with Space Hulk. You could do XCOM with Necromunda. You could do XCOM with Mordheim. You could do XCOM with sort of Death Watch Space Marines hunting Gene Stealer cults. Like, you could do, like XCOM feels like one of those formats that also Warhammer loves to bits. Like, because, you could do XCOM with the Shadow War stuff that's come out recently. You could do a kind of like vehicle XCOM with the old kind of Gorka Morka orc kind of battle car construction stuff. Yeah, that's sort of dream game territory for me, I think.
I would quite like, I feel like maybe this was done at some point, but, space combat game with the giant fleets of Warhammer 40k. I can't remember what the actual board
Battlefleet
game.
Gothic.
Yeah.
There is a Battlefleet Gothic game.
Yeah. I remember there being, seeing some footage of one of those a while back, but I don't remember if it ever came out or whether it was any good.
I would really like a Space 4X. I know that Gladius, the thing they're making is a terrestrial 4X, which feels like, I'm, willing for it to be good, and hopefully it will be good, but it feels like a strange fit for me because settling down and creating cities and, well, city construction and resources. Actually, this is really interesting, potentially. I think, 40k is a surprisingly great fit for a space 4X strategy game because one layer that 40k fiction has is this kind of like, pointedly dystopian abstraction of industrial processes across a kind of vast galactic scale. Because most 4X games, you talk about Alpha Centauri or something like that, don't really, like all Civ stuff, don't really like spend long considering how dehumanizing it is to consider a planet only for the one thing it produces, right? Like say that this planet is worthwhile to me because it makes treads for this particular type of tank. 4 billion people live there, but it's useful because it produces this much of this. And that is explicitly a plot point in Warhammer, right? Like the entire plot planets are just these kind of been reduced to these kind of hive arcologies surrounded by vast sort of industrial wastelands because they've just been geared to making one type of handle for one particular type of gun. And that's what that entire planet is for. And I kind of love the idea of a 4X built around that, where you have to deal with, you're conducting your galactic war, but you have to deal with, like, sometimes these entire civilizations collapse because you've tasked 8 billion people with making, like, windows for land raiders, and now they worship the windows and they've all gone mad.
I think the Mass Effect version, I want to see that, but I want it to be a game where there is no Paragon option. There's just like 3 Renegade options, each worse than the last. Cause for me, that was the sort of time when I realized when Warhammer 40k really clicked with me was when I realized there were no good guys. Like the Empire are fucking horrible and it's just all nasty all the time.
There's like a really great, one of the reasons I love the Horus Heresy so much is it kind of reframes like, the reason everybody is fucked, and it's nice to have like, it's not a heroic story, it is a heroic story, but it's a heroic story where everyone's fucked. Like, no one can win. And it's because as soon as chaos, this kind of primordial threat is functionally, that whole annoying thing people do, and it's like, oh, you've lost the game because you thought about the game. That thing, like that thing. That's what chaos is. Right? You thought about chaos, oh, you lost the game. Because you've thought about it now, so now it's real again. So the early days of the Imperium are an attempt to create a galaxy where no one's thinking about chaos. So only the Emperor knows about chaos, and anyone else who knows about it is forcibly executed. When they encounter offshoots of humanity elsewhere in space that know about chaos and are trying to fight it, and often have much better utopian Star Trek style societies to beat this cosmic threat, these kind of like hyper baroque Catholic space assholes come out of nowhere and not knowing why kill all of them because they have to die because the only way to solve it is for them to be this bad. And then but it never works. I love that as a kind of concept because it means that you are the baddies.
Is that what the concept of heresy is?
Yeah. Heresy is basically admitting that
you thought about chaos.
Yeah, you thought about chaos. Like, I mean, even when demonic incursions are a semi-regular thing in all contexts, it's still, forbidden to suggests that that's what happened. It's always a weird alien. It was never a demon. It was always just a particularly freaky alien.
Is that a problem though?
Like games?
That everything is shit. Everyone's kind of an arsehole deep down, even the good guys. Is that so uniquely catering to British post-empire wallowing that
I think
it can't translate
to me?
I think, well, one thing I think it's a really unusual stance. I think you're right that it's a peculiar tick of British 80s science fiction. It doesn't have that kind of optimistic drive or that we can do it if we all work together kind of thing. It's just like what happens when we all work together is like planetary annihilation.
You can tell a story about like a few, less horrible people in a horrible world, because that's kind of what Game of Thrones is, right? There's a few people who are like, Tyrion's not a saint. He's not a lovely person, but by comparison, he seems like the one.
Yeah, and like one thing I like about a lot of Warhammer fiction is that, or 40k fiction, is that there are characters who have something resembling a moral compass, but it doesn't shy away from the fact that they have a moral compass within the context of being, for example, a space marine, where you're already kind of like a fascist ubermensch. But, it's good at doing that kind of shades of grey thing where it's like, relative to most people, I can root for this person. And it has some human element to it. Like I would totally play like an FTL in the 40k universe where you're just like a rogue trader trying to make your way in the universe and you encounter all of these situations and try and hold on to humanity, but you probably can't. Like, I would play Papers, Please in the 40k universe where you just have one big stamp marked heresy. Yeah. Basically, I think I'd love to see it applied to more kind of adventurous concepts and like the kind of PC style works that tend to get rotated through. But those can produce good things. Like Vermintide's another example of it done well, and that is Warhammer Left 4 Dead, right?
What's the royalty Tinder game that's just had an expansion?
Reigns.
Reigns could work in Warhammer.
Well, and you're the emperor.
Yeah.
Just do whatever you like.
Yeah.
You've
died.
Right
to sacrifice 2,000 psychers
a day. Yeah. Yeah, you're the emperor. You have died. Good. I'd love them to be more adventurous with it. That said, though, I do love that. So I have, I dream of getting to work on a Star Wars anything, right? And that's a distant thing. That's a very hard thing to imagine. However, 40k is not that hard to imagine because it happens all the time. So I'm kind of a little bit invested in it being this accessible to developers of different stripes because, it's not just been sucked up by EA or somebody.
They were making that big MMO, weren't they? They then cancelled. Was it just like a 40k MMO?
Oh,
Dark something? I mean, I'm stabbing in the dark.
Was it called Dark Imperium?
Something was.
Because Dark Imperium is the name of the most recent 40k box set, the models, so I wonder if they...
Yeah, I can't remember.
Dark Future, Dark Millennium. It's called Dark Millennium.
There was a Battlefield-style game I remember seeing on a PC Gamer stream.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that did come out. That is out.
Is it?
Yes.
All right.
That's
Does Space Marine still kind of combat roll around the place?
Yeah.
Which looked particularly weird.
That's what the big round shoulder pads are for. How do you do a roly-poly when you have a massive square head? They can't do the Samus from Metroid thing of actually turning into a ball.
They almost could. If they had 2 more shoulder pads, they could.
Yeah, exactly. Big knee pads. It is silly, but I like it a lot. Next email, so I won't read out the whole thing, but it's from Simon, who, so a few weeks ago, we had someone write in to say that they had wanted to listen to the old PC Gamer podcast Dishonored special, but no longer couldn't find the file anymore because it's obviously vanished off whatever server it was being held on. Simon has written in and very kindly provided us with an MP3 of the PC Gamer Dishonored special, which I will make sure gets passed on to people who want it, which is very, very kind of Simon. Also I thought I'd mention that, partly to say thank you, but also because if anyone else wants that and hasn't been able to find it, then, I can potentially email it off unless hundreds of people ask, in which case I will just upload it somewhere. So yeah, that's a thing to email in about. he does close with saying, P.S. Was the PC Gamer podcast effectively Crate and Crowbar oranges?
Yes.
Well, yes. I suppose it was, yeah. What was for us? I feel like the Crate and Crowbar is a particular, well, I suppose actually, as far as I and Tom Senior are concerned, a particular generation of PC Gamer frozen in time. Obviously, Tom S is still at PCG and Pip is at PCG now, but they also do the PC Gamer podcast, which now exists again, thanks to Sam Roberts. So they both exist now.
In retrospect, the big mistake that the PC Gamer podcast made was putting their MP3 files on the company servers, which instead of going with the much more secure long-term option, which is my personal web space.
Yes.
If they'd done that, they would still be online today, and they're not. Which is a bizarre thought. But my web space was around then. It was around 7 years before that.
Yeah. And yeah, you had like a day of downtime in that time?
Yeah, I was briefly taken offline for a copyright infringement. But that's behind me now. I've really turned over a new leaf.
Yeah, that was a folly of your youth 2 weeks ago.
It was a folly of my youth. It was actually because my web space had been online so long. It was something I uploaded literally like 9 years ago or something and completely forgotten was there.
And no one was paying attention to this stuff in 2006. We were running wild. We were just uploading whatever the fuck we wanted. FTP was just being passed around in clubs.
I like to think in 2006 they made a list of all the illegal MP3s online and they just now got to mine.
Let's not talk about 2006. Actually, it wasn't 2006. It was 9 years ago, right? 2008.
Yeah, who knows?
Not a real time. Didn't happen. That is all of the emails that we have time for this week. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. That's how you do that. We are now in the run-up to Christmas, which means the pod process will kind of sustain itself for a little bit. Expect a Crate and Crowbar Christmas roundup pod to close out the year at some point before Christmas. Probably, well, almost certainly the next 2 weeks, because that's how many weeks there are. I think we've got one more regular episode and then we'll have a Christmas episode after that, I believe, just to set expectations, which we are planning to film, as we've done the last couple of years, do a kind of year roundup in that way. We've also got 2 more episodes of our Bloodborne playthrough coming between this time of recording and Christmas, at which point that series will return in the new year. Hopefully a little Grey Cells in that time as well, time permitting. Maybe even a bonus thing you don't know about. That I'm saying that in those words, because if it doesn't happen, then you don't know about it, but you do now, but shh. And also, immediately before Christmas, we will be putting out the Crate and Crowbar Dungeons and Dragons Christmas special, which I know we've announced in a few different venues now. But it is now recorded.
It happened. And it was great.
Over the course of a very long afternoon. So one thing I've learned, I've done a lot of pen and paper role-playing GMing this year. It's been a big part of my year. And one thing I've learned is that when I say, I think I've planned what will be a 3-hour one-shot, I'm a fucking liar. I'm a liar wrong man, and I'm not to be trusted. So look forward to 4 2-hour episodes. It'll probably be a 4-episode series. The plan is we're going to put it out 1 episode after another, day on day, as a little treat. So basically what I'm saying is block out about half a day of your Christmas. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that at all. But nonetheless, it's coming. Hopefully it'll be fun. We're in the process of editing at the moment. And that's basically us for the run up to Christmas. But you do get your questions in for those remaining pods. Also, I forgot that will be 1 more Miniatures Monthly as well to cover December. A little bit different to the usual format because it's been less than a month. But yeah, we've got loads on. If you would like to support these various activities, then currently the best way to do that is still Patreon, which is patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Obviously, heed my earlier PSA about exactly the subject, but it is still the thing we use to raise money to pay people for their time and gear and equipment and things like that we use to make things half decent. If you would like to follow us on YouTube, you can find us at youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. You can hang out with the Discord community on Discord, the link for which is on our website at crateandcrowbar.com and in the show notes for this episode, which you'll find at the same place. If you would like to follow us as individuals, Tom Francis is on Twitter
at Pentadact, PENTADACT.
John Roberts is on Twitter
JOHN_ARR.
I do have a Twitter account, but I'm not using it. It's C Thurston, which is CTHURSTEN. Thanks for listening.